The mining colony on Kepler 4 and 42b had been silent for 3 standard days when Captain Elena Rodriguez received the distress beacon. She stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the distant planet grow larger through the viewport. The orange dwarf star cast an eerie glow across the rocky surface, making the scattered dome settlements look like glowing jewels against the barren landscape. "Captain, we're picking up life signs from Settlement 7, reported Lieutenant Chen from his station. His voice carried a note of confusion. "The readings are strange. There are definitely humans down there, but there's something else too. Multiple unknown biosignatures." Elena frowned as she studied the data streaming across her command screen. The Kepler colonies were supposed to be routine mining operations, extracting rare Earth elements for the growing human empire. 3,000 colonists lived in those domes, including families with children. The thought of them in danger made her stomach tighten. "Any response to our communications?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. All channels are dead. But we did intercept some fragmented transmissions from before they went dark." Chen's fingers danced across his console. "Uploading to your display now." The bridge speakers crackled to life with broken voices filled with terror. "Giant creatures from the northern wastes. They took the children. God help us. They're intelligent. They're planning something." Elena's jaw clenched. She had fought pirates, rebel factions, and hostile alien wildlife. But something about this felt different, more dangerous. The fear in those voices suggested an enemy unlike anything they had encountered before. "Sergeant Martinez," she called to her Marine commander, "prep your teams for immediate deployment. Full combat gear, urban warfare configuration." The grizzled Marine nodded grimly. "Already on it, Captain. The boys are locked and loaded." He paused, studying the planet's surface. "What are we walking into down there?" "Unknown hostiles with possible human captives. Rules of engagement are weapons-free, but watch for civilians." Elena turned back to the tactical display. "We go in fast and hard. Every minute we wait could mean more lives lost." As the Defiance entered orbit, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would be unlike any other. The scattered reports spoke of creatures that moved with purpose, that seemed to understand human tactics. Whatever had taken the colonists wasn't just some wild beast acting on instinct. Down in the transport bay, Corporal Brian Bree Thompson checked his pulse rifle for the 3rd time. At 24, he was younger than most of his squad, but his steady nerves and quick thinking had earned him respect among the Marines. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his younger sister who would be starting university soon. The idea of families being torn apart by hostile aliens made his hands clench into fists. "Hey, Bree, you good?" called out Private Jackson, his battle buddy for the past 2 years. "Yeah, just thinking about those kids down there." Bree sealed his helmet and ran through his equipment checklist one final time. "Let's bring them home." The dropship shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere, and Elena's voice came through the comm system. "Marines, you are approaching Settlement 7. Thermal imaging shows the main dome is intact but showing minimal life signs. Be advised, multiple large heat signatures are moving through the underground tunnel systems. Something big is down there and it knows we're coming." Through the small viewport, Bree could see the settlement growing larger. The dome structure looked peaceful from above, its lights still functioning normally. But something felt wrong about the emptiness, the lack of movement around what should have been a busy mining operation. 30 seconds to touchdown," announced the pilot. "LZ is clear, but keep your heads up. This place gives me the creeps." As the dropship touched down with a mechanical whine, Bree felt his heart rate spike. Whatever was waiting for them in those tunnels had already proven it could overwhelm 3,000 armed colonists. The Marines were walking into the unknown, but they were humanity's best hope for bringing those people home. The rear hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss, and the squad moved out into the alien twilight. The air was breathable but carried strange scents like metal and something organic that Bree couldn't identify. In the distance, the mining equipment stood silent and abandoned, casting long shadows across the rocky ground. "Movement in Tunnel Complex B," reported the squad's scanner operator. "Multiple contacts, large size, heading toward the main dome." Sergeant Martinez's voice cut through the comm channel with deadly calm. "Listen up, Marines. Whatever took these people is about to find out why you don't mess with human families. Let's go hunting." As they moved toward the settlement, Bree couldn't know that beneath their feet. In the twisting underground passages carved by the colonists' mining operations, Something was watching their approach with keen intelligence. The creatures that had taken the humans were unlike anything in the galaxy, and they had plans for these new arrivals that would test every limit of human courage and determination. The main dome of Settlement 7 stood eerily quiet as Bree's squad approached the entrance. Their boots crunched on the gravel path that should have been bustling with miners heading to their shifts. Instead, abandoned coffee cups sat on outdoor tables, and children's toys lay scattered in the small park area, as if everyone had simply vanished mid-activity. "Thermal scans show 17 humans inside the dome," whispered Private Chen through the comm. "But they're not moving. At all." Sergeant Martinez held up his fist, signaling the squad to halt. Through his rifle scope, Bree could see into the dome's transparent aluminum windows. People sat at tables in the cafeteria, stood in hallways, even remained positioned at workstations. But none of them moved. They looked like statues frozen in time. "Could be some kind of paralysis weapon," Martinez muttered. "Jackson Thompson, you're with me. We go in quiet. The rest of you maintain perimeter." The entrance doors slid open automatically, their sensors still functioning normally. Inside, the dome's artificial atmosphere felt warm and humid. Bree immediately noticed the strange smell he had detected outside was much stronger here, like wet earth mixed with something metallic. As they moved deeper into the settlement, the sight became more unsettling. A woman stood at a coffee machine, her hand still reaching for a cup that would never be filled. A man sat reading a tablet, his eyes staring blankly at the screen. Children stood in a classroom, their teacher pointing at a lesson display that still showed pictures of Earth's solar system. "They're alive," Jackson whispered, checking the pulse of the nearest colonist. Heartbeat is slow but steady. Breathing is minimal. It's like they're in some kind of deep hibernation. Bree knelt beside a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She had blonde pigtails and wore a bright yellow dress with cartoon spaceships on it. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something far away. When he gently touched her shoulder, she felt warm and alive but completely unresponsive. "Sarge, this isn't a paralysis weapon," Bree said quietly. "This is something else. Something that can put people into a trance state without harming them." Before Martinez could respond, the dome's lights flickered. Then they heard it. A sound like metal scraping against stone echoing from the tunnel entrance at the far end of the settlement. Something large was moving through the underground passages, heading directly toward them. "Positions," Martinez hissed. "Whatever's coming, we make our stand here." The scraping sound grew louder, accompanied by what sounded like clicking or chittering. Through the tunnel entrance emerged something that made Bree's blood run cold. The creature was roughly humanoid, but stood nearly 3 meters tall. Its skin looked like polished obsidian, reflecting the dome's lights in strange patterns. Multiple arms extended from its torso, each ending in delicate, almost surgical appendages. But most disturbing were its eyes, dozens of them, arranged in complex patterns across its elongated head, each one focused and intelligent. "Contact," Martinez called out, but before anyone could fire, the creature raised one of its many hands. The gesture seemed almost peaceful. More creatures emerged from the tunnel, surrounding the Marines but making no aggressive moves. Bree counted at least 15 of them, each one unique in the arrangement of their limbs and eyes, but all sharing that same obsidian-like skin and unsettling intelligence. The first creature began to emit a series of complex sounds, clicks, whistles, and tones that seemed to form a pattern. After a moment, Bree realized it was trying to communicate. "Stand down," Martinez ordered quietly. "Let's see what it wants." The lead creature approached the little girl Bree had been examining. With movements so precise they seemed surgical, it placed one of its appendages near her forehead without actually touching. The girl's eyes fluttered, and for just a moment she seemed to see Bree clearly. "They're not hurting them," Bree whispered in amazement. "They're preserving them." The creature turned its many eyes toward Bree and made a sound that was unmistakably questioning. Then it gestured toward the tunnel entrance and back to the colonists. "I think it's trying to tell us something," Jackson said. "Like it wants us to follow it." Martinez shook his head. "Could be a trap. We don't know what these things are capable of." But Bree was studying the creature's body language, the way it moved with careful deliberation around the colonists. "Sarge, look at how it's acting around them. These aren't predators. They're protectors." As if understanding his words, the lead creature moved to a wall display and began manipulating the controls with incredible dexterity. Images appeared on the screen. Pictures from the settlement security cameras showing the arrival of the creatures 3 days ago. But the footage revealed something shocking. The creatures hadn't attacked the settlement. They had been fleeing from something else. In the final frames before the cameras went dark, massive shapes could be seen moving across the horizon toward Settlement 7. Ships. Alien ships that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. The obsidian creatures had reached the settlement just hours before these ships arrived. The lead creature turned to face the Marines again, and this time its clicking sounds carried an unmistakable tone of urgency. It gestured toward the deeper tunnels, then mimicked the action of hiding. "Oh my God," Bree breathed. "They're not the enemy. They're refugees, and they've been protecting our people from something much worse." The realization hit the squad like a physical blow. The missing colonists weren't prisoners. They were in protective hibernation, hidden away from a threat that these strange beings had risked everything to warn humanity about. Martinez keyed his comm channel. "Captain Rodriguez, we need immediate backup down here. And tell the fleet to go to high alert. We've got incoming." Above them, Captain Rodriguez was already receiving reports from her long-range sensors. Massive energy signatures were approaching the Kepler system, signatures unlike anything in their database. The real enemy was coming, and humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. Deep in the underground tunnels beneath Settlement 7, Bree followed the obsidian creatures through passages that had been expertly carved and reinforced. The aliens moved with fluid grace despite their size, their multiple limbs allowing them to navigate the tight spaces with ease. Behind them, the hibernating colonists were being carefully transported on floating platforms that seemed to operate on some form of anti-gravity technology. The lead creature, which Bree had mentally named Echo, due to the way it seemed to respond to sound, stopped at a massive chamber that the colonists' mining equipment could never have created. The walls were smooth and curved, covered in symbols that pulsed with soft bioluminescent light. "This is their ship," Martinez whispered in amazement. "They crashed here." Echo approached a wall covered in the glowing symbols and placed several appendages against specific points. The chamber filled with a low harmonic sound, and suddenly images began appearing in the air. Before them, holographic projections that showed the history echoes. People wanted them to understand. The images showed a beautiful world with crystal, spires and floating cities. Echo's people, the Cathara as the translation systems eventually decoded, had been an ancient civilization dedicated to preserving life throughout the galaxy. For millions of years they had traveled between worlds, documenting and protecting endangered species and cultures. Then came the Devourers. The hologram shifted to show massive black ships appearing in space above the Kithara homeworld. These vessels didn't just attack, they consumed. Everything they touched turned to ash and empty space. Worlds, stars, entire systems disappeared into their hulls, leaving nothing behind but void. "My God," Jackson breathed. "They eat everything. Planets, people, entire civilizations." The images showed the final moments of the Kithara homeworld. Billions of their people had sacrificed themselves to allow a few thousand to escape in ship arcs like this one. For centuries, these survivors had been fleeing through space, trying to stay ahead of the advancing Devourer fleet while warning other civilizations about the threat. Echo turned to face Bry directly, its many eyes focusing on him with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. The creature began making specific clicking patterns while gesturing toward the surface above them. "It's trying to tell us something specific," Bree said, stepping closer. "Something about what's coming." The hologram changed again, showing the Kepler system from space. 3 massive Devourer ships were approaching, larger than Earth's moon and moving with purpose. But the images also showed something else. Detailed scans of human technology, human ships, and most importantly, human weapons. "They've been studying us," Martinez realized, "learning about our capabilities." Echo clicked urgently and manipulated the controls again. This time, the images showed human military tactics from various conflicts, focusing specifically on one thing: humanity's tendency to fight against impossible odds and somehow win. The creature gestured toward the sleeping colonists, then toward the Marines, then toward the approaching Devourer fleet. Its message was becoming clear. The Kithara had preserved the colonists not just to protect them, but because they believed humans might be the key to stopping the Devourers. Bree felt a chill run down his spine. "They think we can beat these things. But why? What makes humans special?" Echo approached one of the floating platforms carrying a sleeping child. The same little girl in the yellow dress that Bree had seen earlier. With delicate movements, it began the process of bringing her out of hibernation. The girl's eyes fluttered open slowly, confusion giving way to terror as she saw the towering alien figure. But then she saw Bree. "Mommy," she whispered, reaching toward him with small hands. Bree immediately went to her, removing his helmet so she could see his face clearly. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now. What's your name?" "Emma," she said, clutching his armored hand. "The tall one saved us from the dark ships. They said the soldier people would come." Echo made a sound that almost resembled approval, then activated the controls to begin waking more colonists. As adults began to emerge from their hibernation, they looked around in confusion and fear until they saw the Marines among them. Dr. Sarah Chen, the settlement's chief medical officer, was among the first to fully awaken. After Bree quickly explained the situation, she began helping to tend to the other colonists as they emerged from their protective sleep. The hibernation process, she explained to Martinez. It's incredibly advanced. No cell damage, no memory loss. They put our entire population under in less than an hour, and they did it safely. She looked at Echo with a mixture of fear and admiration. Their biotechnology is centuries ahead of ours. Above them, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system. "All units, be advised. Long-range sensors confirm 3 massive bogies approaching our position. ETA is 6 hours. These things are bigger than anything we've ever encountered." Echo seemed to understand the transmission and began clicking rapidly while manipulating the holographic controls. New images appeared showing detailed schematics of Devourer ship vulnerabilities. The creatures had been fighting these beings for millennia and had learned their weaknesses. "They're giving us intelligence," Bree realized. "Battle plans, weak points, everything they know about fighting the Devourers." But the most important revelation came when Echo showed them recordings of previous battles. In every case where the Devourers had been defeated or driven away, it had been by species that shared certain characteristics: adaptability, creativity, and an absolute refusal to surrender even when facing extinction. Humanity, according to the Kythera's analysis, possessed these traits more strongly than any species they had ever encountered. As more colonists awakened, families were reunited in emotional embraces. Parents found their children, spouses found each other, and the underground chamber filled with tears of relief and joy. But Emma stayed close to Bree, looking up at him with the absolute trust that only children possess. "Are you going to fight the dark ships?" she asked. Bree knelt down to her level, seeing his own sister's face reflected in her innocent eyes. "Yes, Emma, we're going to fight them and we're going to win." Echo clicked softly, a sound that somehow conveyed both approval and hope. The Kythera had been running for centuries, preserving life wherever they could. Now finally, they had found allies willing to stand and fight. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. Captain Rodriguez stood in the war room aboard the UES Defiance, studying the tactical displays that showed the approaching Devourer fleet. The alien ships were massive beyond comprehension, each one capable of housing millions of beings and armed with weapons that could crack planets. Her small cruiser, with its crew of 800, seemed pathetically outmatched, but Echo had provided them with something invaluable, detailed intelligence about Devourer tactics and weaknesses, gathered over centuries of conflict. Their ships are living organisms, Dr. Chen explained, having been brought up from the surface to help analyze the Kythera data. They grow their vessels like coral reefs, adding layer upon layer of biological armor. But that's also their weakness. They have nervous systems, pressure points, and they can feel pain. Bree stood near the tactical table, still wearing his combat gear. Emma had refused to let him leave the underground chamber until he promised to come back, and her trusting face haunted his thoughts. He studied the holographic models of the Devourer ships, looking for anything that might give humanity an advantage. The Kythera data shows that concentrated energy weapons can disrupt their nervous systems, he said, pointing to specific areas highlighted on the display. But you have to hit precise points, and they learn to adapt their defenses after the first few hits. That's where human unpredictability comes in, Martinez added. He had remained on the surface to coordinate the evacuation of colonists to the underground chambers. Every other species the Kythera studied fought with logical, predictable tactics. "We don't," Rodriguez nodded grimly. "How long until the other ships in our task force arrive?" The heavy cruiser Valiant and the destroyer Wolfpack will be here in 4 hours, reported her communications officer. But Captain, even with 3 ships, were still massively outnumbered. Echo had remained in the war room, its multiple eyes taking in everything with keen interest. Through the translation devices the Kithara had provided, it spoke in a synthetic voice that still managed to convey emotion. Previous defeats of Devourer scouts occurred when defending species used unconventional tactics. Suicide runs, ramming attacks, weapons fired at close range. Humans must be willing to sacrifice for victory. We've been doing that for thousands of years, Rodriguez replied firmly. The question is whether we can do it effectively enough to matter. The answer came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Chen, monitoring communications, suddenly straightened at his station. Captain, I'm receiving transmissions from across human space. Word about the Devourer threat has spread. Ships are converging on our position from every direction. The main display updated to show dozens of signals approaching the Kepler system. Military vessels, merchant ships, even civilian craft were dropping out of hyperspace and heading toward their location. The captain of a mining barge named Prosperity sent a simple message. We heard you need help. We're not much, but we're human. 237 ships and counting, Chen reported with growing excitement. It's the largest gathering of human vessels in history. Echo's eyes shifted to focus on Rodriguez. This behavior pattern, no other species has demonstrated such coordinated response without central command authority. Devourers will not anticipate this level of cooperation. Bree felt a surge of pride mixed with determination. Across human space, ordinary people were risking everything to help strangers they had never met, simply because they were human and they needed help. It was the same spirit that had driven humanity to explore the galaxy in the first place. Echo, can your people fight alongside us? Rodriguez asked. The Kithara made a sound that the translator interpreted as deep sadness. Our ship arc is too damaged for combat. We are few and we are tired, but we can provide tactical support and technological assistance. In the hours that followed, the space around Kepler 442b transformed into a massive staging area. Ships of every size and description formed defensive formations based on the tactical data Echo had provided. Freighters were retrofitted with mining lasers pointed outward. Passenger liners evacuated their civilian crews and loaded up with Marines transferred from military vessels. Bree found himself assigned to the destroyer Wolfpack as part of a special assault team. Their mission was to get close to the Devourer command ship and target the nerve centers Echo had identified. It was essentially a suicide run, but volunteers had lined up for the honor. As he prepared his equipment in the destroyer's armory, he thought about Emma's question, "Are you going to fight the dark ships?" The trust in her voice had been absolute, the kind of faith that children placed in adults to protect them from monsters. The problem was, these monsters were real, and they had been destroying civilizations for millions of years. Thompson, called Commander Hayes, the Wolfpack's captain, we've received additional intelligence from the Kithara. The lead Devourer ship contains millions of preserved beings from conquered worlds. They're kept alive as food sources. Bree felt his jaw clench. How many humans? Unknown, but the Kithara believe there are survivors from at least 12 human colonies that went dark over the past year. Hayes paused. Your mission parameters have changed. In addition to targeting the nerve centers, you're to locate and extract human prisoners if possible. The thought of human families trapped aboard those nightmare ships filled Bree with cold fury. He thought of Emma, of his sister back on Earth, of every human child who deserved to grow up free from the shadow of these cosmic predators. Understood, sir. We'll bring them home. Outside the destroyer's viewports, the first wave of human ships moved into position. They were farmers and miners, traders and explorers, united by a simple truth. No one threatened their species and lived to tell about it. Echo's voice came through the ship's communication system. Devourer scouts are entering sensor range. The battle will begin soon. Remember, they expect logic and predictability. Give them chaos and courage instead. Bree checked his weapons one final time and thought about all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds. From ancient warriors standing against overwhelming forces to colonists defending their homes against hostile environments, humanity had always found a way to survive. Today would be no different. The massive shapes of the Devourer fleet began to appear on the horizon, blotting out stars as they approached. But between them and their target stood something the Devourers had never encountered before. Humans who refused to run, refused to surrender, and refused to let evil pass unchallenged. The defense of Kepler 442b was about to begin. The first Devourer ship emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. Nearly 50 kilometers long, its bioorganic hull pulsed with veins of sickly green light. Tendrils writhed along its surface, each one the size of a city block, while massive feeding ports opened and closed like hungry mouths. Aboard the wolf pack, Bree watched through the viewport as the massive predator ship moved with surprising grace for something so huge. Behind it, two equally enormous vessels materialized, forming a triangle formation that Echo had warned them about. The Devourers were preparing to envelope the entire planet and consume everything on it. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen aboard the Valiant," came the voice through the comm system. The Admiral had taken overall command of the defense fleet when his heavy cruiser arrived. "Remember your targeting priorities. Hit the nerve clusters Echo identified, but don't get drawn into prolonged engagements. We need to hurt them fast and get out before they adapt." Captain Rodriguez's voice cut in from the Defiance. "First wave, begin your attack run. Show these things what humans do when someone threatens our families." The opening salvo came from the most unlikely source. Captain Maria Santos aboard the freight hauler Big Dreams had retrofitted her ship's cargo bay, with 60 mining lasers pointed forward. As her ungainly vessel accelerated toward the lead Devourer ship, she transmitted on an open channel. "This is for my daughter's school on Centauri Prime, you alien bastards." The concentrated mining lasers struck the Devourer's forward hull, burning through layers of bioarmor and hitting one of the nerve clusters Echo had identified. The massive ship actually recoiled, its hull rippling with what could only be described as pain. "Direct hit," reported Lieutenant Chen from the Defiance. "The nerve cluster is damaged. The ship's forward weapon ports are going offline." Encouraged by this success, dozens of other converted civilian vessels began their attack runs. A luxury liner called Starlight Express, now bristling with military-grade weapons, targeted the creature's sensory organs. A colony transport named New Horizons used its powerful cargo manipulator arms to physically grab and tear at the ship's feeding tendrils. But the Devourers quickly began to adapt. The damaged ship's hull started to regenerate, growing new armor over its wounded nerve clusters. Worse, defensive weapons began emerging from previously smooth sections of the hull. Biocannons that fired concentrated plasma bursts. "Wave 2, you're up," Admiral Chen commanded. "Military vessels, full assault pattern. Don't give them time to heal." The destroyers Wolfpack and Thunder Bay led the charge, their torpedo tubes loaded with specially modified warheads based on Cathera biotechnology. These weapons were designed to disrupt organic nervous systems, causing paralysis rather than just physical damage. Bree strapped himself into the assault shuttle as the Wolfpack shuddered under return fire from the Devourer ship. Through the hull, he could hear the whine of the destroyer's engines pushed to maximum output as Captain Hayes maneuvered through a storm of alien plasma bursts. "Assault teams, prepare for deployment," Hayes announced. "We've got a narrow window to get you aboard that thing before it fully adapts its defenses." The plan was insane even by human standards. While the main fleet kept the Devourer ships distracted, small teams would board the alien vessels and target their central nervous systems from the inside. It required getting close enough to one of the feeding ports when it opened, then surviving whatever horrors waited inside. Echo had provided them with detailed maps of Devourer ship interiors, but the Cathera's warnings had been sobering. The internal spaces are designed to process living beings. You will encounter digestive chambers, neural extraction facilities, and worse. Many of the preserved victims are kept conscious to maintain the freshness of their neural patterns. As the shuttle launched from the Wolfpack's bay, Bree could see the massive battle raging across space around him. Human ships darted between the Devourer vessels like angry insects, their weapons leaving glowing scars on the alien hulls. But for every hit they scored, the Devourers seemed to grow stronger, their bioarmor adapting and their weapons becoming more accurate. 30 seconds to insertion point, announced the shuttle pilot. "Feeding port is beginning to open. This is going to be tight." Through the shuttle's reinforced viewport, Bree could see their target, a circular opening nearly 100 meters across, lined with what looked like metallic teeth. As it opened, a stream of organic fluid poured out into space, carrying with it debris that made Bree's stomach turn. Pieces of destroyed ships, fragments of buildings, and worse things he didn't want to identify. "Go, go, go," The pilot shouted as he flew the shuttle directly into the feeding port. The sensation of entering the Devourer ship was like being swallowed alive. The walls around them pulsed with a rhythmic beat, and the air was thick with a humid, organic smell. Bioluminescent strips provided dim lighting that cast everything in an eerie green glow. "Move fast," Bree commanded his team as they disembarked. According to Echo's intelligence, the central nervous system is 3 kilometers toward the ship's core. "We've got maybe an hour before this thing's immune system recognizes us as a threat." The team of 12 Marines moved through corridors that were clearly not designed for humanoid beings. The floors were soft and slightly springy, while the walls curved in ways that suggested they had grown rather than been built. Worse were the sounds, a constant background noise of rushing fluids, mechanical clicking, and what sounded disturbingly like distant screaming. After 20 minutes of navigation through the alien vessel's twisted interior, they found what they were looking for: the preservation chambers. Row upon row of transparent containers stretched into the distance, each one containing a living being from a conquered world. Bree's heart nearly stopped when he saw them. Humans floating in the preservation fluid, their eyes closed but their bodies showing no signs of decay or injury. "My God," whispered Sergeant Kim, one of the team's veterans. "There must be thousands of them." But it was the smaller containers that made Bree's blood run cold. Children, dozens of them, preserved like specimens in a twisted museum. Their peaceful faces showed no sign of the horror they had experienced. But the thought of what the Devourers planned to do with them filled him with rage. "Priority targets located," he reported through his comm unit. "Beginning extraction procedures. We're going to need a lot more shuttles." As his team began the delicate process of opening the preservation containers, Bree thought about Emma and her absolute trust that the soldiers would save everyone. For the first time since the mission began, he felt a spark of hope. They were going to keep that promise. Deep inside the Devourer ship, Bree worked frantically to free the preserved humans while his team set explosive charges on the massive nerve clusters that controlled the vessel's functions. The preservation fluid had a sweet, cloying smell that made his stomach turn, but he forced himself to focus on the faces of the people he was saving. The first container he opened held a woman who looked to be in her 30s. As the fluid drained away, her eyes fluttered open and she gasped, choking on the preservation medium. Bree quickly attached a breathing mask and helped her to a sitting position. "Easy, easy," he said softly. "You're safe now. We're human military. We're getting you out of here." The woman's eyes were wide with terror and confusion. My children," she whispered. "They took my children. We'll find them," Bree promised, though his heart sank as he looked at the endless rows of containers. How could they possibly save them all? Behind him, his teammates were discovering the true horror of the Devourer ship. Sergeant Kim had found what appeared to be a nursery section filled with children's containers. Private Martinez had located adult preservation chambers that stretched for nearly a kilometer. The scale of the alien harvest was beyond anything they had imagined. "Bree, we've got a problem," reported Corporal Davis from his position near the nerve cluster. "These charges aren't going to be enough. The nervous system is too distributed. We'd need to hit at least 6 different locations simultaneously." Before Bree could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Emergency lighting began flashing, and a sound like an air raid siren echoed through the bioorganic corridors. "All teams, this is Admiral Chen," came the voice through their comm systems. "The Devourers are beginning a planetary bombardment. We've lost 8 ships and the enemy is adapting faster than anticipated. How's your progress on the boarding mission?" Bree looked around at the thousands of preservation containers, then at his small team of 12 Marines trying to wake up survivors who were barely conscious. Even if they worked for days, they couldn't save everyone. But then he remembered something Echo had told him about human unpredictability. "Davis, can we redirect these nerve clusters instead of destroying them?" He asked. "What do you mean?" "The Cathera said these ships are living organisms. They have nervous systems, which means they can be controlled. What if we don't destroy the brain? What if we take it over?" Davis stared at him. That's insane. We don't know anything about their neural architecture. But Echo does." Bree keyed his comm unit. "Cathera Ship Arc, this is Assault Team Alpha. We need technical assistance for a hostile takeover of Devourer neural systems." Echo's synthetic voice responded immediately. "Corporal Thompson, such an attempt has never been successful. Devourer nervous systems are designed to resist external control. Designed by who? These things evolved, right? That means they can be hacked, reprogrammed, or overridden. We just need to know how. There was a long pause before Echo responded. Uploading neural interface protocols to your suit computers. Warning. Direct interface with Devourer nervous system will likely cause permanent psychological damage to human operator. Bree looked at the faces of the preserved children around him, then at his team members who were watching him with expressions of growing understanding and horror. I'll do it, he said quietly. Bree, no, Kim protested. We don't know what that thing will do to your mind. We don't have a choice. Bree began connecting the interface cables that Echo had designed to his suit's neural pickup system. If I can control this ship, I can turn its weapons on the other two Devourers. I can use its own digestive systems to break down the preservation containers safely. And I can pilot it away from the planet. As he approached the largest nerve cluster, a pulsing mass of bioorganic tissue the size of a small building, the rest of his team continued working to free as many prisoners as possible. The interface process would take time, and they needed to save everyone they could before he attempted the takeover. The woman from the first container he had opened was now conscious enough to help with the others. Her name was Dr. Sarah Walsh, and she had been the chief administrator of a colony called Haven's Rest before the Devourers arrived. There are children from 12 different worlds in here, she told Bree as they worked together to open more containers. The Devourers have been harvesting human settlements for months, maybe longer. Bree helped a young boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old sit up as he coughed out the preservation fluid. The child looked around with confused, frightened eyes before focusing on Bree's armored form. Are you a space soldier? The boy asked in a small voice. That's right, buddy. We're here to take you home. The boy smiled weakly. I knew someone would come. Mommy always said the space soldiers protect everyone. As more prisoners were awakened, stories emerged of the Devourer attacks. The alien ships would appear without warning, deploying fast-moving capture pods that could snatch entire populations before any defense could be mounted. Children were prioritized for preservation, followed by adults in their physical prime. The elderly and infirm were simply consumed immediately. They're farming us, Dr. Walsh said with barely controlled rage. They take the young ones to ensure a continuing supply, then harvest the adults when they reach optimal neural development. The thought made Bree's hands clench into fists. But it also reinforced his determination to make the neural interface work, no matter the cost to himself. Interface cables connected, Davis reported. Bree, you sure about this? Bree looked around at the dozens of freed humans, including children who were clinging to the adults with desperate hope. Through the ship's structure, he could feel the vibrations of the ongoing battle outside. Human ships were dying while their crews fought to buy time for the rescue mission. Echo, initiate neural interface, he said firmly. The moment the connection activated, Bree's world exploded into chaos. He was suddenly aware of every part of the massive ship, its weapons, its digestive systems, its propulsion, all of it flooding through his consciousness like a tidal wave of alien sensation. But underneath the overwhelming data flow, he could feel something else. The ship's hunger, its endless need to consume and grow and spread. For a terrifying moment, Bree felt that hunger becoming his own. The humans around him looked less like people and more like potential food sources. He could sense their neural patterns, could imagine how sweet their consciousness would taste. Then he thought of Emma's trusting face, and his own humanity reasserted itself with violent force. Not today, he growled through gritted teeth, and began turning the ship's own systems against its alien masters. The war for humanity's survival had just taken a dramatic turn.